The summer I turned 62. I did something I had been promising myself for 30 years. I bought a house. Not just any house. A real one. A 2-story craftsman on half an acre in western Tennessee, about 40 minutes outside of Nashville, tucked back from a county road that barely showed up on GPS, the kind of place where you could sit on the back porch in the morning and hear absolutely nothing except wind and birds and the occasional tractor 2 fields over. I had driven past properties like this my whole career, always through a windshield, always on the way to somewhere else. I was a mechanical engineer for 34 years. Started at the bottom with a drafting board and a pocket calculator. Retired with grey hair and a pension that took the better part of 3 decades to become worth anything. My wife, Margaret, passed 8 years before I retired. Breast cancer, caught late. We never got the retirement we planned together, and for a long time I wasn't sure I even wanted it without her. But Margaret was not the kind of woman who would have wanted me sitting in a recliner feeling sorry for myself. She made me promise in those last months that I would keep going, that I would build something. She used that exact word, build. So when I finally got my pension letter and handed in my badge, I called a real estate agent named Patricia, drove out to Williamson County, and 3 weeks later I signed my name on 37 pages of documents and became the owner of a house I had not told a single member of my family about. That was intentional. My daughter, Melissa, was 31 at the time. She taught 3rd grade at an elementary school about 20 minutes from the apartment she shared with her husband, a man named Bryce. They had been married 4 years. I had walked her down the aisle. I had helped them move into that apartment. I had shown up every Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter without fail. I loved my daughter completely. Bryce was a different matter. I don't say this easily. I spent years giving him the benefit of the doubt. He was charming when he wanted to be. And in the beginning he wanted to be quite often. But over time I noticed things. Small things at first. The way he spoke over Melissa in conversations. The way he never seemed to hold a job for more than 18 months. The way he always had a reason why nothing was ever quite his fault. He had been a project manager, then a sales consultant, and something involving cryptocurrency that he explained to me twice and that I still could not have described to anyone. Each time one thing ended, there was always a new opportunity just around the corner. Melissa never complained. That was the part that worried me most. I told her about the house about 2 months after I bought it. I called her on a Sunday afternoon, asked if she wanted to come see it that weekend, just the 2 of us. She sounded genuinely excited. She drove out alone, and we spent the afternoon walking the property, sitting on the porch, eating sandwiches I had made from whatever was in the cooler. She cried a little when she saw the back field, said it reminded her of the camping trips we used to take when she was small. I told her this place was going to be my project. I was going to fix the fence line, build a proper garden, maybe put up a workshop eventually. She hugged me before she left and said, "Dad, this is exactly what you needed." I thought that was the end of it. Just a nice afternoon between a father and his daughter. It was not the end of it. 3 weeks later, Bryce called me. He didn't call often, usually only when Melissa's phone was dead or when he needed something. I answered on the second ring, standing in my kitchen unpacking a box of tools. "Hey, so I've been thinking," he said, without much in the way of hello. "About your place out there." I set down the wrench I was holding. "What about it?" "My folks are in a tough spot right now. Their landlord sold the building they were renting, and they've got to be out by end of next month. I was thinking, you've got all that space and they're good people, they wouldn't be any trouble. Bryce, it'd just be temporary, 6 months, maybe less. They'd have the upstairs, you wouldn't even." "Bryce, stop." He stopped. "That's my home," I said. "I bought it, I'm living in it. The answer is no." There was a pause that lasted just long enough to tell me he had expected a different answer. "I mean, obviously it's your call," he said, in the tone people use when they want you to know they think your call is wrong. "I just thought you'd want to help family. Your parents are not my family, Bryce. Melissa's my wife. And she's my daughter. which is why I'm asking you respectfully not to put her in the middle of this." He said he understood. He said he appreciated me hearing him out. He said goodbye in a way that made it clear the conversation wasn't actually over for him. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a minute, looking out the window at the back field. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a man named Terry, who had done some security work on the house for the previous owner, and still had his card on the bulletin board in my mudroom. I asked him to come out and give me a quote on a camera system. Not elaborate, just thorough. He came out 2 days later, and by the end of the week I had 4 cameras covering the front door, the back door, the driveway, and the side gate. All of them connected to an app on my phone, all of them running continuously. The footage saved to a cloud backup automatically every 6 hours. The second call was to my neighbour, a retired sheriff's deputy named Walt, who lived about a quarter-mile down the road. I had introduced myself when I first moved in, the way people do out in the county, and we had shared a few conversations over the fence. I told him I was having a family situation and asked him to let me know if he ever saw an unfamiliar vehicle at my place when my truck wasn't in the driveway. He said he would. Walt was that kind of neighbour. The third call was to a family attorney named Susan Halverson, whose name I found through the County Bar Association. I made an appointment, drove into Nashville the following Tuesday, and sat across from her desk for 90 minutes. I wanted to understand exactly what my rights were. She was direct and practical, and did not waste my time. She explained that the property was mine, in my name alone, with no co-ownership of any kind, and that anyone who entered it without my permission was trespassing, regardless of family relation. She also told me something I hadn't asked about, but turned out to be important later. If you ever have reason to believe someone is making financial decisions in your daughter's name without her knowledge, she said, document everything. Every piece of paper, every account statement, every communication. I thanked her and wrote her a check for the consultation. I don't know why that last thing stuck with me. At the time, I told myself I was being overcautious. Bryce was unpleasant and entitled, but I didn't have any specific reason to think he was doing anything criminal. I just noted what Susan said and filed it away. Melissa called me a few days after my conversation with Bryce. She apologized, which is the part that made me sad. She apologized on his behalf, like she always did. I told her there was nothing to apologize for, that I loved her, that the answer was still no, and that she and I should have dinner soon. She agreed and sounded relieved that I wasn't angry at her. We had dinner the following Saturday at a barbecue place she liked near her school. She seemed fine, tired maybe, but fine. 6 weeks passed. I fixed the back fence, started turning over soil in what would eventually be the garden, and spent a lot of good evenings on the porch doing nothing in particular. I drove into Nashville when I needed to, and came back when I was ready to. It was the life I had been working toward for 34 years, and it was, finally, exactly what I thought it would be. Then Walt called me on a Wednesday morning in October. "Got an unfamiliar SUV at your place," he said. "Backed into the driveway, 2 people unloading boxes. Your truck's gone." I was 45 minutes away at a hardware store. I thanked Walt, went to my truck, and opened the camera app on my phone. The footage was clear. There were 2 older adults, a man and a woman, neither of whom I had ever met, carrying cardboard boxes through my back door, which I had locked, which had a new deadbolt I had installed myself. The door was open, which meant someone had given them a key, or someone had found a way in that I hadn't accounted for. I watched for 3 minutes without moving, then I put my phone in my pocket, drove back to the hardware store, bought what I had come for, and drove home. I did not call Bryce. I did not call Melissa. I did not call the police yet, though I thought about it. I wanted to see this clearly before I acted. When I pulled into the driveway 45 minutes later, the SUV was still there. I sat in my truck for a moment. Then I got out and walked around to the back of the house. Bryce's father was sitting in one of my porch chairs. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s wearing a canvas jacket reading something on his phone. He looked up when he heard me come around the corner. He did not look surprised to see me. That told me everything I needed to know about what he had been told about this arrangement. "You must be Melissa's dad," he said, and put out his hand. I looked at his hand. I looked at him. "What are you doing in my house?" I said. He blinked. "Well," Bryce said, "Bryce doesn't live here. Bryce doesn't own this property. I do, and I want to know how you got through that door." He started to say something about a key, something about Bryce having arranged things, but I was already walking inside. Bryce's mother was in my kitchen, unpacking dishes from a box and stacking them on my counter. Not her dishes. My dishes, which she had apparently moved aside to make room. She looked up and smiled with the particular warmth of someone who assumes they are welcome. "You must be," she began. "I'm going to need you both to stop," I said. My voice was even. I had spent 34 years in rooms with contractors and inspectors, and people who needed to be told things clearly without any room for negotiation. "Leave everything where it is. Don't take anything else out of any box. Don't touch anything else in this house. I need you both to sit down." They looked at each other. Bryce said this was settled, the father said from the doorway behind me. "Bryce was wrong," I said. "Please sit down." They sat at my kitchen table. I pulled out a chair across from them, and I asked them a series of questions I already knew the answers to. When had Bryce told them about the arrangement? What had he told them about the terms? How had they gotten a key? Had Bryce mentioned that he had spoken to me? The mother said Bryce had told them I had agreed, that I had said they could use the upstairs as long as they needed, that I had been very understanding. I nodded slowly. "He told you that," I said. "Is there a problem?" the father asked. "Yes," I said, "there is. I did not agree to this. I told Bryce no, directly and clearly about 6 weeks ago, and the two of you have entered my property with a key I did not give you, without my knowledge or permission, and have begun moving your belongings in." The silence that followed was the kind where people realize a story they were told does not match the situation they are standing in. I want to be honest about something. I felt genuinely sorry for them in that moment. They were older people who had been caught in the middle of a lie their son told them. They hadn't done anything wrong except trust him, but I also could not let what was happening continue, and the way to help them was to be clear, not kind. I told them I was not going to call the police that afternoon, but that I needed them to pack what they had brought in and leave, and that the key they had used needed to be placed on the table before they walked out. I told them this was not a negotiation, and that I bore them no ill will. They packed up. It took about an hour. The father placed a key on the kitchen table without looking at me when he set it down. They drove away, and I stood at the window and watched until the SUV was gone. Then I called Susan Halverson. She told me I had been patient, and that the next steps depended on what I wanted to accomplish. I told her I wanted to protect my property, and I wanted to understand what Bryce had actually done. "He obtained access to your home through deception and provided a key to third parties without your authorization," she said. "That's actionable. Whether you pursue it legally is your decision, but I'd suggest you pull together every document you have, the deed, any communication with Bryce, the camera footage, and we'll look at the full picture." I sent her the camera footage that evening. All 4 angles, time-stamped and continuous. I did not contact Bryce. I contacted Melissa. This was the hardest call I have ever made in my life, and I've made some hard calls. I asked her to come to the house the following Saturday. I told her there was something she needed to see and that I was not angry at her, but that it was important. She came alone. I made coffee and sat her down at the kitchen table and pulled out my laptop. I showed her the footage from the cameras. I watched her face while she watched the screen, the way her expression moved, confusion, then a kind of frozen stillness, then something that was not quite anger but was very close to it. When it was over, she didn't say anything for a long time. "When did you put cameras in?" she asked finally. "About a week after Bryce first called me," I said. She was quiet again. "He told me you said yes," she said. "He told me you had called him back and worked something out." "I didn't call him back," I said. "I told him no the first time he asked." "Dad!" "I know. He told me you said yes. I know what he told you." She sat with that. "I know he told you." She sat with that. I refilled her coffee and she didn't touch it. Then I told her the other part. The part I had not planned to raise that day but felt I had to. A few days after the incident with his parents, I had been going through some paperwork, my own financial records, pension statements, that sort of thing, and I had noticed a letter on my counter that I hadn't put there. It had arrived in the mail addressed to me but had been opened. I had not opened it. It was a statement from a joint savings account I had set up years ago as an emergency fund with Melissa's name on it, one we hadn't touched in years. The balance was lower than it should have been by a significant amount. I showed her the statement. She stared at it for a long time. She said, "I didn't know about this." "I didn't think you did." The amount missing was $41,000, withdrawn in increments over 14 months, from ATMs and bank transfers in amounts small enough to avoid automatic flags. I had only noticed because of the letter, and the letter only ended up on my counter because someone, Bryce, almost certainly, had picked up my mail when he came to leave a key with his parents, opened it, and then set it down without realizing I would be able to trace exactly when it had arrived versus when it had been opened. I don't know if that was careless or if he thought he could manage it. Either way, he miscalculated. I told Melissa that I had already spoken with Susan about this and that there were options, and that none of them required her to make any decisions that day. I told her what I needed her to know was the truth, and that I was her father, and that whatever she decided to do next, I would be beside her. She didn't cry immediately. She sat very still for a while. Then she stood up, walked out the back door, and stood in the yard for about 10 minutes by herself. I let her. When she came back in, she said, "I need to call my bank." I handed her my phone. What followed over the next several months is difficult to summarize, simply because it involved many small steps, each one less dramatic than the last, each one necessary. Melissa spoke to her bank and confirmed the withdrawals. She met with Susan, who helped her understand what had been done and what recourse she had. She moved into the upstairs of my house in November, which was something I had offered but not pushed. Bryce was confronted by law enforcement in January. The financial fraud charges were filed in March. He had a prior civil judgment for something similar from a previous relationship, something that had not come up before they married, something that a better background check might have caught. The divorce was finalized the following September. I am not going to pretend that any of it was clean or easy. Melissa had believed in this man. She had built 4 years of her life alongside him. The grief of that is not something that resolves quickly, and I was not going to rush her through it. There were nights she sat at my kitchen table and talked, and nights she didn't want to talk, and both were fine, but she is teaching again. She joined a community garden 2 towns over and goes on Saturday mornings. Last spring, she started taking a pottery class with a woman from her school, and she came home one evening with a lopsided bowl she had made herself and put it on my kitchen counter, with the particular satisfaction of someone who made something with their hands. I know exactly what Margaret would have said about that bowl. I know exactly how she would have looked at our daughter. I think about those cameras I put up on a quiet October morning, 4 small devices that cost me less than $400 at the hardware store. I think about the attorney I called not because I was certain something was wrong, but because I wanted to understand my position before something went wrong. I think about the neighbor I introduced myself to when I first moved in, the simple courtesy of saying hello over a fence. None of it was dramatic. None of it required me to raise my voice or make threats or do anything other than pay attention and be prepared. Bryce thought I was a retired old man with a property he could use. He thought that because I had been polite I could be managed. He thought that because Melissa trusted him, I wouldn't look too closely. He was wrong about all of it. The fence in the back field is finished now. The garden came in well this spring. Tomatoes, green beans, a row of peppers that did better than I expected. The workshop is framed up, and I expect to have the roof on before fall. Some mornings I sit on that back porch with my coffee before Melissa is awake, and I listen to the birds and the wind, and the county road where almost no one drives, and I think about the 34 years it took to get here, all the projects, all the early mornings. All the things I did not buy and did not spend and did not waste, because I was building towards something that at the time felt very far away. It doesn't feel far away anymore. I built this. I protected this. And nobody is going to take it from me. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in any grand philosophical way. Just the simple, practical kind you learn when you spend 34 years solving engineering problems. Every outcome has a chain behind it. Every failure has a point where something went wrong that nobody caught in time. And every result, good or bad, traces back to a decision somebody made. Usually quietly. Usually when they thought no one was paying attention. Bryce made a series of decisions. He decided I was someone who could be managed. He decided that because I was polite, I was also passive. He decided that the distance between what he told Melissa and what he told his parents would never be crossed, that the two versions of the story would never meet. He decided he could take from my daughter slowly enough that she wouldn't notice, and that by the time anything came to light it would be too complicated to unravel. Every one of those decisions was wrong, not because I was smarter than him. I'm not sure that's even the right measure, but because he underestimated what happens when someone has spent a lifetime paying attention to detail. When you check your numbers, when you introduce yourself to your neighbor, when you make the phone call you don't strictly have to make yet because you'd rather be prepared than caught off guard. That's not cleverness. That's just discipline. It's what you build over decades when you decide early on that you are going to be the kind of person who follows through. What I keep coming back to, though, is Melissa. Because the hardest part of this entire thing was not the cameras, not the attorney, not even the moment I watched strangers carry boxes through my back door. The hardest part was sitting across from my daughter at my kitchen table and watching her understand in real time that the person she trusted most had been lying to her face for over a year. That's not something you fix quickly. That's not something that resolves cleanly at the end of a story. She's doing better now. Genuinely. But I watched her earn that. She had to decide, and it was a real decision, not an easy one, that the truth mattered more than the comfort of not knowing. That's a kind of courage most people don't talk about, because it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It just looks like a woman sitting in a lawyer's office asking the right questions and then going home and making dinner and getting up the next morning. I think about Margaret sometimes when I watch Melissa do that. The same steadiness, the same quiet refusal to fall apart when falling apart would have been completely understandable. I'm not going to tell you that what happened to us was fair or that everything worked out perfectly, because neither of those things is entirely true. Melissa lost 4 years and a significant amount of money, and a version of her future she had believed in. That is a real loss, and I'm not going to minimize it by wrapping it in a lesson. What I will say is this. The things I had built, the discipline, the preparation, the habit of documenting and verifying and not assuming, those things did not come from luck. They came from choices made one at a time over many years. And when it mattered, they held. You don't build that overnight, but you do build it, one decision at a time.